Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for attending another informative webinar hosted by Vigilance Limited. Today, Monique and I are going to host as usual. Monique's going to bring some questions in around the midway point, so please put your questions to us using the question option. Today we've brought back Andrew Gibbon-Price from AP Partners. Andrew's got extensive knowledge in the AML compliance, obviously, and is an auditor, and we really value Andrew's input on these matters. So welcome, Andrew.
Thanks, Sam.
No worries. Okay, so let's crack into it because we've got a lot to get through. So, you know, this is 10 points actually. We've got 9 there, but there's actually 10 points, and we're throwing in a really important one at the end that you must all be aware of, and so you'll get value out of that as well. So we've got an hour to get through this, and we'll also be showing some brief videos between slides on how to do things a little bit better as well. So number 1 on the hit list is politically exposed person, PEPs. We all know about it. The Act says it has to be done, and that's on every customer. So we're not going to dwell on the specifics of the Act, but we're going to talk about more about how you execute these and meet your compliance. So today we're going to refer back to the findings from auditors and supervisors on each of these items, starting with PEPs, obviously. And Andrew, I'm going to get you to talk to these slides in terms of the good, the bad, and the ugly, and then I'll talk about the green ticks and how to overcome some of these.
Yeah, sure. So I think the first point on Google searches, I think that's not a settled issue at the moment. I've seen conflicting views from supervisors about whether a Google search is adequate or not. I think potentially it can be adequate, given that they have quite a sophisticated algorithm. You can do detailed searches on people. The real issue around doing Google searches, though, is that they are time consuming. And simply doing a Google search saying you've done a Google search is not sufficient in terms of documentation. You need to actually demonstrate, you know, what you searched for, how many results were returned, what pages you viewed, and what your findings were. So, as you say, it's not really practical, and it is time consuming. Asking the client if they're a PEP, again, the Act requires you to take reasonable steps. Whether I would question whether simply asking them is a reasonable step or not. You can't assume they're not a PEP either. So I think for using a third-party list like Centrix or any other sort of lookup services really is a no-brainer because they're low cost. It's about $1 per search. You immediately get a result, and it's got all the findings on there that you can put on the file, and that should be accepted as taking reasonable steps to determine whether your customer or beneficial owner of a customer is a PEP.
Yeah, that's right. And there's a number of search lists out there. Some of the electronic, some you can. There's even free services out there to run up PEP checks. But you need to, whatever you use, you've also got to keep those findings as evidence. And so we find Centrix very good simply because it provides a really good comprehensive report. There's other solutions out there. But we use those very effectively and integrate nicely with Centrix. So we're just going to run through an example of that. As Andrew said, you know, for as little as $1 and a click of a button, you can do a PEP check and satisfy the requirements. Findings are also, or the report from Centrix in our case, is automatically attached to Vigilance to your client record. So done and dusted, you can get on with revenue producing activities and not muck around with unnecessary slow administration for the sake of $1. And of course it's compliant with the Act. So that's address checks, that's for PEPs. They also do other checks. So we'll just have a quick look at this short video to give you a better example of how that looks.
I'm going to show you how easy it is to do a PEP check in Vigilance. First of all, edit the customer record. Make sure you have a first name, a middle name, a last name, and their date of birth. Making sure you've got a middle name is a good idea to reduce the possibility of some false positives. Once you've got those three details, just come down to the section where it has a Centrix check. Click on the button, put in the information about how you had consent from your customer. Of your terms of engagement letter, for example, and click on the PEP check option and click verify. This will connect to Centrix and look in their sanctions list and check to see if your customer is a politically exposed person. So it's come back and said that we've got a hit here for a PEP check. I'll show you what happens when we have a hit. In the customer risk assessment area, it will fill in the field here that says that they are a PEP, and it was confirmed by the PEP check from Centrix. It's changed the CDD type to enhanced. Now, up in this section here, you can see the Centrix report has been attached to the customer record automatically, and this shows that they are a hit. And this report from DataZoo will show you all the information about this person and what all their political positions are, who they're all linked to, all their linked persons and so on. So it gives you a lot of detail about where the sources are for collecting PEP information.
Okay, so that was PEPs. Now we're going to look at item number 2 on the hit list, and that's enhanced customer due diligence. Again, the Act's very prescriptive on what's required here. The code of practice has information about it, but how do you actually do it in practice? Because this is a big problem area. I think everybody has struggles with. So Andrew, again, findings from auditors and supervisors.
Yeah, I think the first point is a good one, not obtaining sufficient nature and purpose information. For all of your customers, we have a business relationship, then yeah, you need to be documenting what the nature and purpose of the relationship is. And it's that really ties into how you categorize your customer in terms of your risk assessment, because you need to know exactly why they're using your services, how frequently or what volumes you expect them to be using it. And then when you start seeing activities from your customer outside that the expected nature and purpose, that should trigger a review. Mm-hmm. So yeah. And in terms of the next bullet point, not only trust, I think that's right. So the Act is prescriptive in the sense that, yeah, all trusts are subject to enhanced CDD, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're high risk. You can have a trust that is low risk according to your risk assessment, but you still have to do enhanced CDD. On the other hand, you may have individuals or companies that you categorize as high risk according to your risk assessment, and therefore you need to do enhanced CDD. So there's situations in which enhanced CDD applies is according to the type of entity, if it's a trust, and then other situations, for example, if you have to do a suspicious activity report, or you suspect you need to do one, and that may trigger, that should trigger ongoing CDD at that point, and you may decide to do enhanced CDD at that point. The catch-all is where there's any other if you have any reason to believe that the risk requires enhanced CDD. So that really comes down to what your risk assessment says. And as you said, if you got there noted on the third bullet point, yeah, DD should be conducted based on your documented policies and controls outlined in your compliance program, which in turn is based on the risk assessment. So the risk assessment really should drive how your compliance program operates.
Right, and there's confusion around source of wealth, source of funds. So this is, my view is that the Act itself is prescriptive but not descriptive. The purpose of the Code of Practice and explanatory notes are the descriptive part to help, but even they have either open to interpretation or not descriptive enough in certain things, leaving reporting entities wondering how to execute some of these things in practice. I think one of the first things is understanding the nature and purpose of the activity. Is it even captured? And if it's not, you don't have to do CDD or EDD. A really interesting one too, I think, is around trust, where the Act says trusts have to have enhanced due diligence. Well, that's fine, but when engaging with the trust, particularly with the reviews going on with trust reviews because of the trust changes in January next year, we talked about this the other day, didn't we, Andrew? And it's probably better to first engage with the trust to find out what's required and whether the work needed to be done ultimately is captured.
Yeah, exactly. And that sort of comes down to nature and purpose, what activities, services or goods are being provided to your customer. It may not be a captured activity, in which case, you don't have to do any AML sort of compliance.
Yeah, so important to keep your understand your risk assessment and your compliance program and make sure they work in sync. Source of wealth, source of funds, always painful. Nobody likes asking their clients around these things. Sometimes it's easy to ask for one than the other, depending on, again, the nature and purpose of the business, the activity for the client. Getting a client accountant's obviously familiar with financial activities of an organisation, so that's helpful. But equally, if you've got a long-standing client relationship and knowledge of how the clients built their wealth, you have that information, you have the confidence to be able to say that, but you still need to note it regardless.
Yeah, correct. I mean, you need to, again, you need to take reasonable steps to verify this information. If you're already familiar with the client, then getting external verification may not be necessary.
But equally, not waving your hand at the end and saying, well, I know this customer, we've had them as a customer 20 years. You still need to note that if that's the case somewhere where it's going to be audited in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. It all needs to be documented.
Yeah, exactly. If it ain't written down, it didn't happen. Okay, so example of EDD using Vigilance AML. This is, again, everybody has systems. Vigilance, this is just another way of doing it, but it's a very succinct and great workflow. So highlights when EDD is needed in the first place. Really important, it manages country sanction lists, because they can also trigger enhanced due diligence, because it's not just trust, it could be somebody from a foreign country with less AML compliance than New Zealand does, and that's what those sanction lists are all about. And again, it streamlines your ability to be compliant with the Act. So we'll just have a quick look at this little video, and you can get a flavour of how this can be done, and maybe you can enhance it yourself with your own systems.
Vigilance has built into it a list of countries that are high risk. If a customer that you're working with has a country of residence or any of their nationalities which is a high risk country, and that's identified in the country drop-down list with the word risk after it, then the risk assessment section of the customer record will be set to high risk and CDD type is enhanced. So that's just a little bit of peace of mind that You don't need to worry about which country it has got a high risk or not. Vigilance will pick that up for you.
All right, so moving on to item number 3, ongoing due diligence. So again, the Act's clear about the statement that ongoing due diligence is required. We touched on it at the beginning. Now that law firms, of which most of the viewers today are, it's obviously you're well over 2 years into it now, and ongoing due diligence has become a reality. So it's that ongoing it's that ongoing due diligence, isn't it? You've got to demonstrate that you've got a process in place to do that. So from recent audits, what are the findings here, Andrew?
Yeah, so what I normally see is compliance programs are, fairly detailed around the CDD process, but then the ongoing CDD, which is equally important, is a little bit thin. So yeah, I think a lot of times you see the ongoing CDD is conducted when necessary. I've seen that a couple of times. But that's not really, it's not really sufficient. Your policies and controls around ongoing CDD need to be quite clear in terms of how you do it and how frequently you do it. So for example, as I mentioned before, for low risk customers, high risk customers, what is the interval in which you actually do it? A lot of reporting entities have sort of taken a position that where they have existing clients, prior to the AML Act coming in force, they don't have to do CDD on them, which is correct. You didn't have to automatically do CDD on all of your existing customers, but where captured services activities are being provided, you do have to do ongoing CDD. So at some point, all of your existing customers should be subject to, you should conduct CDD on them.
Right, so that's actually a really interesting point. I wonder, and I don't know this, but are you seeing that may be the case in those that you've provided auditing to or consultancy?
Well, I think it's unclear. As I say, the policies and the procedures around it don't really talk about what they're going to do with their existing customers. So that's often a management point that's sort of highlighted to those to the audit clients, and they need to come up with a process around when they're going to do CDD for their existing customers.
Yeah, and that process is key again, because you can't practice compliance without a consistent process in place. So, the hints and tips here are really, a compliance program should, your compliance program should state the review period based on the risk levels you've assigned. So categorising our risk to high, medium, low, for example, and what those review periods are, so that when the likes of Andrew come along and do an audit, that's clearly stated, and it doesn't have to be any more than that. Setting up a calendar reminder or storing next review date of a customer and against their record in your practice management suite is another way of doing it. Maybe not the best way to do it, but it's a way of doing it, and also being able to demonstrate it, and talking in your program around how that you actually do that. What's your mechanism what's the trigger for capturing these?
Yeah, I think calendar reminders are good. I mean, it's a form of control, isn't it, to ensure that it doesn't get missed and that it is actually done. I mean, this is all about control and procedures that are documented for when you're audited, either by, heaven help you, the supervisors, who will be very clear on what they want to see, or your auditors. So again, touched on it before, but Vigilance uses this concept of inactive customers because it really cuts through a whole lot of unnecessary CDD. If you deem your customer to be inactive, then you don't need to do ongoing due diligence on them necessarily. So there's a really good way of pigeonholing a whole bunch of customers that
you don't need to deal with. So you can focus on the ones that are important and prioritise. So again, Vigilance has a really slick way of doing this for ongoing due diligence. It's automated, so you can set up alerts, so it's really set and forget. So you don't need a calendar appointment. Vigilance has that running in the background and alerts you. Archiving inactive customers to prioritise active customers, as I said. So again, that's really slick and a really good way of doing compliance. So we'll do a quick video on that, show you what that looks like, and it'll give you an idea of how Vigilance does it really effectively, and either how you might be able to enhance your own processes.
Ongoing due diligence in Vigilance is simple to set up, and most importantly is evidence for your auditor that you have a schedule in place. My list of customers here is showing that I have CDD due for review by these dates. Now this has been automatically set up based on some settings that I have linked to the risk level for my customer. For a low risk level customer, I've said that we're going to review these customers every 3 years, and for high risk customers we're going to review CDD every year. Now that's just what I have set up in this test company. Your compliance program should be specific on what the policy is for ongoing CDD and how often the client details are reviewed. So this will be different from firm to firm. Now I can simply set up my timeframes in the settings page, and here it shows for low risk customers I'm going to review every 3 years, for high risk every 12 months. And for the high risk ones I'm going to get an email sent to the compliance officer to let them know that there are some customers due for a review. When the customer is due for review, it will show with a green circle showing that we still have all the CDD details in place, but they just need to be reviewed by the compliance officer and then marked as complete if everything's okay. The other thing that you can do is to set your customers to inactive when they no longer have a business relationship with you. This way it will remove your customer from the schedule for automatic review. However, if you ever need to look back at those customers' details, they'll still be here. And of course, if the customer comes back for some new business, you can simply change them back to active.
All right, that was good. Number 4, training register. Often overlooked, I think, this one, but again, if it ain't written down, it didn't happen. A big part of AML compliance is demonstrating that all staff, customer facing and otherwise, have got a knowledge of AML and know how to execute their role around it in a practice. So let's talk some of these findings from auditors and supervisors, certainly over the last year. Andrew.
Yeah, so I think training registers is definitely a good idea, highly recommended. What I'm sort of seeing is that there is training being undertaken by relevant staff within an entity, a reporting entity, but the problem is it's not sufficiently documented. So in terms of training, yeah, you have to do training and ensure that it's actually carried out and it's relevant for the staff that are involved. But again, it all comes down to documentation. You need to actually demonstrate that you've done it and what the training, who provided the training, who attended, what topics were covered. And that's where the training register comes in, because it really demonstrates compliance in that aspect.
Yeah, so yeah, it demonstrates exactly that compliance is being practiced and it's recorded as such. So again, hints and tips around this is, a lot of this is just common sense stuff, guys, but keep a dedicated AML training register. Include who, when, and how, save content titles and links. Even this webinar is a training that can be recorded for those who participate. In fact, even if you don't get a certificate, you don't want a CPD certificate, you can still record that you attended this, and this is the content. In fact, this video will be circulated, and the PowerPoint for this, which is, good material to share with others in the organisation as well, and should be that low hanging fruit to be able to comply around that training. So training should be relevant too, as you've mentioned, Andrew, to the staff role, whether the administration back end focused or more front end customer focused. And hey, look, subscribe to DIA updates. There's a link you can click here in the PowerPoint that we'll share, and watch their free webinars. They're great. They're actually informative, and hey, they're from God, so check them out. They've got some good information in them. So again, we're just going to show you a quick example of how Vigilance manages the training register. Again, it's slick, it's concise, it gets all the information, and importantly, again, when you get around to that audit, you can see that you've got this all recorded in one place, which is really handy for the auditor or the supervisor if they're going to do a desktop audit.
Vigilance has a dedicated AML staff training register. It can show your auditor a breakdown of all the training that your staff have had for AML. Each of these can show you what the training was covered, who the provider was, who attended, and this can even include staff meetings that you may have had with your staff, so not just restricted to external training that you've had. So you can see here in the grid all the courses and training that's been done so far. If you want to group it by staff name, you can see all the courses that a particular staff person has done over the time. Alternatively, you can group it by course name and find out who was on each of the courses and like who and the date and so on. So the information stored about each staff training record, it has a name, how the training method was given, some details of the training, and who attended it. Along with that information, you can store any notes about the training, and the other thing you can also attach to each training record is perhaps if there was a certificate of attendance, like a CPD certificate, or some breakdown of what the contents were of the training.
Okay, so now we're at the halfway point. We're keeping track of time, which is good, aren't we, Monique?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, so you've got some questions. Let's listen. Let's talk to those now.
Okay. But the first question is in terms of identification of clients, and there's some queries as to why we need birth certificates with driver's licenses. So what's the reason behind having a birth certificate if we can positively identify our client with their driver's license?
So this is coming from the amended IV code of practice, where they specify the forms of ID that are acceptable. So a passport is fine as a single sort of identity document. Why a birth certificate on its own or a driver's license on its own is not sufficient. I guess that's really that. It's hard to say. That's really what the supervisors have come up with. I suspect it could be because the driver's license itself is issued from a different department, possibly. Yeah. So it's hard to say.
But Effectively, that's what it says. That's what's required in IFCOF, so that's what you do.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I
if
mean,
someone wanted...
you don't have to follow the code of practice, so I guess that's something to be aware of. You can opt out of it if you wish.
Yes, but you have to replace it with something equally or more robust and demonstrate that, which can be a can of worms in itself.
Yeah, that is a following question is, what do you actually need to do to opt out?
So to opt out of the code of practice, you need to, well, you don't have to do anything, you just don't follow it. But what you should do is notify your supervisor that you are opting out of the code of practice. That way you get the benefit of a sort of safe harbour. So if you opt out without notifying them, then there's a presumption that you're not compliant, potentially. So that is an issue. So if you are going to opt out, always notify your supervisor that you are doing so. And they'll probably ask you why, and you'll need to explain that to them.
And I suppose in that case, you would have to show them that you have sufficient alternative procedures in place to identify the customer based on your risk assessment.
Correct. I mean, you should let them explain exactly what you're doing differently from the code of practice. So, for example, if you want to just accept driver's licenses, then that's fine.
Okay.
Just explain why you're doing that.
Right. The next question I have is, we've got someone here whose most of their clients come to me when they're refinancing or buying or selling. So therefore, the ongoing CDD is usually done just when they're instructed to buy or sell. So is that ongoing CDD frequency sufficient given the nature of the clients?
Yeah, so ongoing CDD applies when there's a business relationship. So if you have a business relationship with your customer, then you should be doing ongoing CDD. And how frequently you do that really depends on what your compliance program says. So, for example, if your customer is categorized according to your risk assessment as low risk or medium risk, you might do it every 2 years. So if the customer is classified as, according to your risk assessment, as high risk, you might do it every year. So it really depends on the frequency. If the customer is coming in once a year, you're doing a transaction for them, then it may not be a business relationship. So ongoing CDD doesn't apply. So you would simply, when the customer comes in for a transaction, you check the CDD records at that point.
Yeah, that's why we have this concept in Vigilance of the ability to archive a customer. That makes it fairly definitive. So if they return, you can unarchive them. Because the nature of that question is they may not come on a regular basis or come back at all. It's a bit open-ended, isn't it? Yeah,
I mean, if they're coming several times a year, then you'd probably think that is a business relationship. And so effectively your ongoing CDD will be conducted every time they come in, because you'll be checking their identity, make sure that it is the same person, and updating those records if necessary. Yeah, and again, ties back to your risk assessment. So really think about your risk assessment to perhaps mitigate some of the work around the lower risk customers. Exactly, yeah. Okay, that's great. Well, let's keep schedule. We'll move through to the balance of the 10 points that we're covering today. All right, item number 5, document management. Again, prescriptive on this. You definitely should be treating them as living documents. It's expected that they are reviewed on a regular basis. It's for you to determine what you consider regular. Again, there's some common findings here across both auditors and supervisors on this. I don't think that auditors and supervisors disagree on anything either around any of these points that we're sharing with you today. So Andrew, perhaps talk through this one. Yeah, I think not reviewing and updating the risk and compliance documents is definitely a good one, because you know, what I do see is a lot of people have used templates, and it's obvious they haven't been updated. I mean, so when they're first implemented, it's obvious that it's a template, but even when things change, the documents haven't changed at all. So I think what I normally recommend is that they, like a training register, there's also a document register. So you have versions of the document, and you can highlight when it was last reviewed, what changes were made, if any. That really is a good idea to demonstrate that you've actually reviewed and updated the risk assessment where necessary. And the updates can be anything: a change in the business, the way you're doing things, a change in CDD service provider if you're using one, updates from the supervisor and the FIU. So those, it all, as you say, it's all document management, and those things are living documents. So they should be updated regularly and reviewed regularly. And that should be documented as well inside the risk assessment and compliance program. How often are they reviewed?
Yeah, and less is more, isn't it? So to manage your risk assessment and compliance program, the best thing you do is keep it a short document. I know that a number of conversations with the DIA have highlighted that they don't want to see lengthy documents. They want to see pragmatic, practical, easy to follow compliance programs that say what they mean and you do what they say. So easy to wade through, not something that, and there's nothing wrong with using templates, but you need to really customize it to be personalized to your business, demonstrate this stuff, and you've thought about it. And using, recommendations, using hyperlinks. Don't cut and paste screeds of copy from the Act and then put a point around it. That's just plagiarism. That's not really demonstrating understand it. Just put a hyperlink to that section of the Act. And really important, demonstrate that document is being reviewed on a regular basis. I personally think it should be nothing less than a minimum of a year, I should say. And probably not the month before your next audit. Okay, so again, document management is something that Vigilance does very well. Again, all in the same compliance platform, so everything's in one place. Easy to access documents, revision history and management is automatically updated as soon as you're putting documents in. And you can, of course, if you can find them, then you can, they're much easier to treat as living documents. And again, it's compliant with the Act. So I'll show you a short sort of 40-second video on how simple that is in practice with Vigilance.
Your risk assessment and compliance program are living documents, so should be updated whenever required. You can see in Vigilance here all the risk assessment documents, right from the very first original one that was uploaded. Since then, we've had several updates, and the auditor can see quite clearly that there is regular reviews being done, regular updates. It can show you when the last review date was, and also when your next review is due to be done. That's a similar case to the compliance program, where you can see the original documents, and then each time the compliance program has been reviewed and things have been added. For example, things that might need to be added is if your auditor finds a mismatch between what your compliance program says and what's happening or not happening in your practice. Also, adding new technologies to your AML processes, for example, using a third party for onboarding or for outsourcing, must also be included in your compliance program. So Vigilance provides a really easy way to keep track of all of those updates so that your auditor is...
Okay, keep the questions coming. Number 6, transaction monitoring. This is an interesting one because transaction is a sort of an umbrella term. You've got transactions through your trust account, which are, you know, the financial transactions, and of course you've got transactions going on with your customer and your engagement with them. So Andrew, probably better you talk to this in terms of you know, monitoring of accounts and transactions.
Yeah, so I think it'll come down to the relationship that you have with your customer. What you know, but you should be doing both if both are relevant. It might be one or the other, reviewing their account behaviour or the transaction behaviour, and that's actually separate from ongoing CDD. When you're reviewing their accounts or transactions, then you may see something odd that is not consistent with the stated nature and purpose, and that may trigger ongoing CDD at that point. But again, I think the first bullet point is correct. It's not really something that is mentioned, but again, it doesn't actually go into any detail of how account behaviour or transaction behaviour is monitored. Who does it? At what point is it done? So it might be, so for a law practice, it might be whenever you have an interaction with the client, then it should be noted down, you know, what's going on with the client. Is there any change in the expected business relationship and the services that you're providing or what the client is doing?
Okay, so you know, Vigilance focus is very much around transaction monitoring, so it's got a whole module in there that you can use. So I've already talked to those points in respect of these slides. So make sure you firstly are registered with GoAML. A surprising number of firms aren't. Whether you have prescribed transactions to ever report or not is not the point. You're expected to be registered with them, because you also need that for potentially filing suspicious activity reports as well. And not being registered with GoAML is a potential red flag because they can see you're not. And having a process for reviewing transactions in your trust account, for example, that identifies captured activities, you know, that has to be done. You need to show that you've got a robust process in place, not just bright lining a bank statement every month or so. And being able to identify if you have PTRs. You know, I've often heard firms say, yeah, we don't have them. We never have overseas transactions, so we don't have to worry about PTRs. But then the following sentence, I'll say, well, actually, we received funds that we were unaware of in our trust account only last week from overseas. That's because somebody might already have their bank account number and are transacting something, the business you haven't even fully engaged with yet. So those events can happen, can't they, Andrew?
They can, and I think that that's where the compliance program should be detailed on exactly what you do in those situations. If you receive a wire transfer, and what does the compliance program say? Like if it's an unexpected one, then what do you do? Do you send it back, or are you gonna follow through with those instructions and forward it on to wherever? If you are, then that is a PTR, and that is a wire transfer, and you need to file a PTR in respect of that. So yeah, it all comes down to what does your compliance program say. And again, I think that's the good thing about Vigilance, is that you can monitor your trust account very easily and review those transactions and quickly identify if any transactions do need to be reported.
Yeah, yeah, exactly that. It monitors transactions. You can set up some business rules, and it sifts through finding out transactions that, you know, flag them, so that if you get a surprise, that it captures it. In fact, I talked to a lady the other day that received some money in the trust account, had to track it down, didn't know where it come from. Somebody had their bank account number and were engaging in business and already put the money in. They hadn't onboarded. In fact, when they went to onboard, it was a professional trust. The trustees were a bit belligerent and didn't want to do CDD. So she rightly said, well, you've got to have the money back. So she sent the money back, but she then contacted the FIU to see whether she needed to do a PTR, and she had to do a PTR both ways. So, you know, That was the advice of the FIU. So monitoring transactions and vigilance, again, a module, very effective. You can generate automatic rules, and again, it captures those scenarios along with other potential transactions that need to be monitored. So we'll just have a quick look at that video to give you a flavour of how simple that can be.
Monitoring transactions from your trust account can be done this way in Vigilance. Either upload a bank statement file that you've downloaded from your bank on a regular basis, or if you have ASB, then we can set up some bank feeds. Once the bank transactions have come into Vigilance, go to the transactions page. All the new transactions that have come through from your bank will appear in this grid. You can set up a filter if the transactions are of a regular type, and you can set some rules around them, whether every transaction of this type with this reference and from this person is always going to be non-captured, then a filter can be set up like that. For something that's one-off, you can simply go into the transaction record and state that it's either captured or not captured. Link it to a customer if you want to, and save the record. There's not a lot of information needed to be kept about the non-captured transactions, so once you've identified them as such, they will just stay here in the non-captured area of Vigilance. If you find that a transaction is captured, simply edit the transaction, choose the type of activity that it will be for, say residential conveyancing. Again, you can link to a customer. You can see straight away this one hasn't got CDD completed. Some information about what the transaction is for. Save it. And all of those transactions will appear in your captured transaction grid. At any point, if you need to do a prescribed transaction report, for example, I've got here an international funds transfer, then that can be done at this point and shown in more detail in the next video. By going through each transaction and marking them as captured or non-captured with their descriptions, you are then able to get some totals for your annual report, which will show you totals for each type of activity and the values of funds coming in and out, and that will save a lot of time for your annual reporting.
Cool. Okay, so if you do end up finding PTRs, transactions that need to be registered with Go AML within 10 working business days, or actually it's 10 working days, then there's a requirement to do so. So one of the things we've seen is there's a lot of focus, Andrew, around compliance at the front end onboarding customers, but the follow-on compliance there's less focus on that, and audits have highlighted this as well, I think. So that's things like training register, transaction monitoring, ongoing CDD, and so on. So what's being reflected in findings from auditors in this regard?
Yeah, I think again, I see that well, from what I've seen, most are filing PTRs, so they are doing that. But I think the deficiency really isn't around the compliance program. The Act is quite prescriptive in terms of you have to have documented policies, procedures, and controls. And that's where it sort of falls down a little bit. And I think normally there is only one person that will be reviewing them. So there needs to be a backup plan as well. So for example, if that person is away, then who's gonna step in and do that? And that all needs to be sort of documented in the compliance program. Exactly, who files them, and there should be a review process as well. Who reviews them? And if that, and who is backup, if someone's away or falls sick or gets hit by a bus or something, then who's going to take over?
Yep, it all goes back to that. And so by reviewing this, it's fair to say that some of these things should be a little bit generic as opposed to naming somebody by name, maybe their title.
Yeah, definitely, it should be a title, because I mean, depending on the business, there may be turnover. Frequently. So it should all be an ideally a name title of, what position person is responsible for doing this. Normally it's the compliance officer. Okay.
So again, in order to effectively do this specific task, compliance task, you have to have a system or a process in place for being able to capture PTRs and have it documented, so be consistent with both. So we know that submitting PTRs is extremely painful. Anybody today in this webinar will be rolling their eyes if they've ever done one, because it is a big job to enter a PTR. None of the information saved. You've got to start from scratch, even if it's the same PTR month in, month out, and only one of them. So Vigilance has a strong integration to Go AML to automate that process and streamline it. So it takes what can be 30 to 40 minutes down to a couple of minutes, really buying back some time in terms of your valuable time in the organisation.
Creating a prescribed transaction report for sending to Go AML is really easy in Vigilance. What I have here is a whole pile of transactions that have come through the trust account. I've identified that this particular one is a captured activity, and because the money has come from overseas, I'm going to do an international funds transfer report. So this is all the information I need to store about the transaction. I can see it's come in, income 30,000. I've filled in the captured activity. It is an international funds transfer. I've linked it to my customer name, and I can see that CDD is complete for my customer. Described the transaction. I've said where the funds are coming from. So Australia, filled in the details of the currency, SWIFT code, and so on. To create the PTR, I just need to click on the Create XML button. And then there's two simple steps. I click on this button to download the file, and then I open Go AML to upload the file. And that's as easy as jumping into Go AML, browsing for the file, which is here, and then going upload. And that's it. The PTR is now uploaded into Go AML, and it was as quick as that.
Okay, annual report. We're just off the back of that. Everybody has to submit at the same time. Particularly tough for lawyers who have just come off the back of audits and then they go straight into the annual report. I don't know how you get time to actually do business. So again, we often hear people say this is really hard to pull this information together each year. And so some of the findings here, Andrew?
Yeah, I think definitely the first bullet point is definitely a red flag if you do not file an annual report, because the DIA, they do have a list of all reporting entities. So I would imagine they are monitoring that to see who hasn't filed an annual report so far. And I think there's a lot of questions in the annual report. So there is a lot of it will not be applicable, but it does require you to report transactional data, number of customers, and all sorts of different things. So really the difficulty is actually gathering all that information and being able to file it on time.
Yeah. So there's about 120 questions for phase 2 reporting entities together. A lot of the questions are actually yes or no or arbitrary sort of responses, but the statistical information that needs to be collected is extremely difficult if you haven't got systems in place. And again, you need to demonstrate you have at the end of the day. So make sure, firstly, you're registered with the DIA's annual report portal, because as Andrew said, that is likely to be a red flag because they'll know. But have a process that keeps count of customer CDD types and the volume and the values of captured transactions. Whether you've got them or not, you'd need to demonstrate numbers. You could use a spreadsheet to do this, but you need to little and often do it throughout the year, capturing this information. So not leaving it to the end of the year, very difficult. Another tip here would be make sure the person filing is already registered with RealMe, because if you're not, you can't gain access to the DIA's report portal. So that can take a few days to a week or so. Schedule a reminder, simple thing to do, but schedule a reminder and giving yourself enough time to prepare for an annual report. So you guessed it, example of annual reports in Vigilance, click of a button generates a report. Isn't that a lot easier? Because it's collecting the information as you do all your other activities all in the one platform. It can collect this and aggregate the information and provide your annual report literally at the click of a button. Quick and easy, compliant, get on with revenue producing activity in the business. So we'll just have a 30-second video, quickly show you how that actually works in practice in Vigilance and how slick that is.
Creating an annual report from Vigilance is as simple as going to the Annual Report tab, choosing the report start date and clicking the button to generate the report. Simply print the report, and you can use all of this information for uploading into AML Online, which is the DIA's portal for entering your annual report details.
Okay, just about winding up now, guys. Number 9, outsourcing CDD or enhanced due diligence and or other compliance activity. So the Act states you can engage in an agent. If you don't have staff, you can employ somebody external to the business to do all of your AML compliance, but it doesn't remove the responsibility of you are ultimately responsible for your compliance. So Andrew, do you want to talk to some of these findings here?
Yeah, I think I haven't seen a lot of customers using agents. There is a little bit of confusion around it. So using an electronic identity verification provider like Centrix, like Vigilance, isn't actually an agency sort of relationship. You are still doing the CDD, so that's not being outsourced. You're just using a third-party service to assist you in that. But in cases where you are using an agent, then again, it needs to be documented exactly, how that's done and why it's being done in the compliance program. And yeah, so again, it comes down to the documentation, and a lot of times it's just not sufficiently covered. So they'll go through the requirements of CDD and what they need to do, but the practical steps and procedures are not documented adequately.
Okay, so again, it's make sure that your compliance program clearly states if you're using a third party, any third party in your AML puzzle, because that's what it is. So nothing wrong with outsourcing, just as long as you've got it recorded and the mechanisms around that.
Yeah,
and
Yeah, I was just going to say I think the second point is important as well, the record keeping, and particularly purging records within 5 years or 7 years for most lawyers and accountants. I think that's their normal sort of stated policy. But yeah, the Act does require you to dispose of those records after a certain time frame, and that it's still early days. We haven't got to that point yet for phase 2 entities, but when that timeline sort of comes up, then that will be an issue, because there's so many different ways records are maintained. Some are just emails, so you need to have a process in place where you can actually purge those records from your systems. That may prove difficult.
Yeah, that's right, and that's the point too I've got there in terms of hints and tips. Avoid sending or receiving personal customer data via unsecure email. I know that emails are ubiquitous, but they're grossly unsecure, and you're exposing that delicate information of your customers' sensitive identity data. But people keep on falling back to emailing stuff backwards and forwards, and of course, to that point you've just raised, purging data in the future is going to be extremely difficult to prove you've done it, because it's, the internet after all is a web. You've got all this information being flying around in different formats. It's problematic. So you do need to consider carefully where you're storing all your client sensitive information. That includes your email trails and so on. And review the new privacy policy. I'm going to talk about this. We've thrown this last slide and we're going to come back to this, so I'm not going to dwell on that now because that's incredibly important. So again, example of how simple outsourcing can be in Vigilance. So outsourcing is, Vigilance doesn't do it itself, but we plug into outsource agents. So if you want, you don't have to email information. It's all generated securely out of Vigilance, so you can make a request, and we're going to have a quick look at that. So the reality is that there are multiple ways of onboarding customers. You may onboard all your customers yourself and not use an agent. That's fine, but you'll find in doing that, you've still got different ways of onboarding, whether the customer is Singapore, sight unseen, it's COVID, you can't meet your customer face-to-face in New Zealand. There's all these different scenarios, and it's very difficult to find a way of being able to onboard all your customers. And so we're going to show you a way of being able to do that really, really effectively for different horses for different courses. Simple as clicking a request if you want to do enhanced due diligence, or you don't want to do it, you want to outsource it. And even on an ad hoc basis, should you get really busy, is a key point here. And most importantly, I'll come back to this in the last slide, the ability to do this really securely without sharing your client's sensitive identity information on the internet via email and so on. So we're just going to have a quick look at that video.
There are several ways you can get new customer records into Vigilance. You could send them an onboarding form, which can be customized with your own logo and your own privacy policy. You can send an invite through Apply, and the information that comes back from Apply ID will be added directly into Vigilance. You can import a spreadsheet of customer records, or you could add a brand new customer directly in Vigilance, or you could click on the outsource option and choose from a list of agents that you have a relationship with to ask them to onboard your customer and complete their CDD.
Okay, this is the last slide, guys, and it's a really important one. It's super relevant because the Privacy Act, hopefully you all know that that comes into effect in December 1st in a few weeks. Are you prepared? So the top line here is the privacy changes affect organisations that collect, store and use personal information about either their employees or their customers. So that's pretty much all of us, not just viewers today, but it's every organisation is going to be touched by this. So as reporting entities, you have a responsibility to protect highly sensitive data on your customers, and you hold a lot of sensitive information, obviously, on your customers, including that CDD onboarding identity information. So if you have concerns about your systems and processes, you need really to look at talking to an AML specialist and make sure you're compliant. In fact, not even just AML, right across your business. So if you've got an IT provider, you need to be talking to them. So some examples of the key changes in the Act: it will become mandatory to report a privacy breach. They're going to be strengthening cross-border protection, or the Act strengthens cross-border protection of personal information, and the expansion of the Privacy Commission's powers to actually, bring down fines on those that have not met a suitable standard in care and protecting. So hints and tips around this right off the bat. If you don't have a privacy policy, you need to get one. There's a link here. You can go off to a government website and generate a privacy policy. It's really quick and simple. It's nice and slick. Just use it and build out from it if you need to. And review the new Privacy Act coming into effect. So are you ready? We've got a link here to a really good video that it's been put together by the Privacy Commission. So if you haven't seen it already, I suggest you do. Review your privacy policy. Include a strong review of your processes, not just AML, but your whole organisation when it comes to any touch point on sensitive information or customer and employee information, so payroll systems and so on. And make sure you have a system assurance from your service providers, including CDD agents and software vendors. So Vigilance included. So we're communicating to our customers to tell them exactly they can be confident with, because we take privacy seriously, and our system assurance is thus. And we'll give them a list of all the dot points about what we do to maintain and make sure that their data and their customers' data is secure in Vigilance. And that's really important because it mitigates a lot of stuff. Instead of having locally stored information, you had to start building more documentation around demonstrating you're doing your bit. We're not going to watch that now. Okay. So some quick examples of what may be affected. So, if a company employee is working from home, so COVID is a good example of that being influenced now, and they work on a laptop that's been stolen, customer information, that's going to be reported as a breach, because there's customer information on that. Whether it's used nefariously or not, it's not the point. It's been stolen. That's the breach. If you're in the habit of sending and receiving personal information by emails, well, as stated before, emails aren't secure. So very difficult to avoid that, but you need to consider carefully what information you're sharing. And there are other ways to do it, as you saw earlier in Vigilance. Everything is exchanged. So if you're using Vigilance and choose to use an external agent, we protect that data because you're not emailing the agent any sensitive information. You're just notifying the agent through a click of a button in Vigilance that you've got some CDD to do. They will log into Vigilance and they will do it. So there is no email involved. It's all secure through the cloud platform. And disclosure of personal information outside New Zealand. Now, this is a really interesting one. I'm not going to dwell on it. You'll be able to see it in more detail when you look at the video and the new legislation. But you need to very carefully consider who receives the information out of New Zealand, and obviously in New Zealand for that matter. So those are some examples. Something you're just, more compliance, I know, but you just got to deal with it. It's the Act, and you don't want to end up having the law brought down on you. Okay, so that sort of brings us to an end today. Thank you very much for everybody attending. Certainly hope you got some value from that. There's a survey at the end of this when you close out, and we'll be looking for some feedback from you. Always appreciate that. Some quick points to leave with. I love these ones. If it's not written down, then it didn't happen. That's from an audit and DIA's perspective. Show me, don't tell me. Quick and simple. Great guidance for making sure that you are executing your process and procedures properly. If you want to know any more information, there's our phone number, our email, you know, we provide practical, common sense solutions for AML compliance. Don't hesitate to give us a call. If anybody's interested in looking at the software, then we certainly can provide that as well. Andrew and Monique, thank you so much for attending today and helping out with this webinar. And
You're welcome.
I think we've got the Melbourne Cup today, so good luck if anybody's putting some money down on that. I don't think there's going to be any audience there, but the Melbourne Cup will go ahead, so that's great. So thanks again, everybody. Talk again soon.